Firstly, to note the passing of Bob Hawke, former Prime Minister of this country. Bob was a great statesman of the country, regardless of where your political alliances are, and I do wish to acknowledge the passing of Bob at our meeting today. Also wish to acknowledge our CE will be leaving with some staff early today. They're going down to Sydney to receive the award for the Voice Project. I do commend you, Terry, on the job you've been doing there, and you have the full support and endorsement of this council and the staff, and please share it with the staff, and don't play up too much tonight down there, and to receive that award. It's a great achievement, and it adds to everything that you've been doing in your time as CE, and to do with our share with our councillor. CE was on Radio National this morning, bringing forward our water issues. He's been doing an outstanding job. So he has driving this, and our visit to Sydney last week was also outstanding in that meeting. And Terry, you've shown great passion and dedication to the job, and you've only been here a short while, and you're all about Tenterfield now concerns, and I do, and I wish you well there today. So I open the meeting, councillors, and I welcome you all once again. We give the thanks for the contribution by pioneers, early settlers, for those who fought in the various wars for the fabric of Tenterfield community we have today. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be accepted in thy sight, O Lord. Amen. Acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we're meeting on today. I would also like to pay respect to the elders both past and present, the Juckaville, Kamilaroi and Bunjalung nations, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present. Councillors, we do have an apology by Councillor Michael Petrie. Can I have a move in a second to accept that apology? Councillor Don Forbes, thank you, Councillor. Second by Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, and I thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Disclosures and declarations of interest, councillors. Councillor Petrie. Bronwyn Petrie, which item is it, Councillor?
Well, it's just that we invite at 9, just that we get our vehicles serviced
Yep.
at 6.
Yep. No, fair enough. I commend you. Yep. It's to do with item ENV 6/19. Thank you, councillor. Yep. And you will be staying in the meeting, councillor? Yep. Councillors, confirmation of our previous minutes. Would someone who was in attendance at that meeting like to move that they are a true and correct record of our meeting in April, please? Councillor Tom Peters, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bob Rogan, and I thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Tabling of documents, councillors. There's no tablings, urgent or late supplementary items of business. Community consultation. We do have two attendees. I don't see James in the. So I apologise. Councillors, to do with item ENV 6/19, development application number 2019.026 to do with the dwelling. We do have a speaker to do with that, Mr. Graham Rossington. He's speaking against the application. Mr. Robinson, would you like to come forward and address council, please? Please stand, councillors, and welcome a visit to our chamber. Councillors, welcome in. You have 5 minutes for your address, or we'll give you a warning when there's 1 minute left.
Okay. On behalf of the objection to the application.
Mr. Rossington, just before you go, I do need to make you and everyone aware it needs to be to the report, and no doubt it will be.
It is to the report that you mentioned, yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rossington.
Okay.
Continue.
Now, in the reports in the minutes of the meeting here today, I think they're a very informative report and a very good job has been done, even though I'm speaking against the motion. Now, I speak on behalf of the 6 objectors to this, and in relation to RU Village. Now, this village zone is the same as the actual town of Tenterfield we're standing in now. Now, owners were aware that covenants on this block of land when they purchased the land, and have chosen to disregard and act contrary to the covenants. That the title search was supplied with our objection showing MRH Hanson as the first schedule. The second schedule showed that the restrictions on the use of the land. Now, Mr. Hanson had this all the time before he submitted this application, and I know my rights. They're stated quite clearly in the minutes of the meeting. I have no rights to object to council's decision. I do have rights to act. I think that anyone turning up talking about acting in court is a little bit out of order, so I won't go any further that, apart from to say that it should hold up in court, because they knew this is less than 12 months since they bought the block, and they weren't going to do this when they first bought it. Now, the owner's lack of respect to council by not submitting a building application and camping there and moving in 2 dongas. Council have covered that quite well in their report, and I've got a copy of that search title here if anyone wants it, but it would be available if they want to go and pursue it themselves.
Can I just make it clear there, Mr. Rogers, that actually they're not living in the dongas, they're living in a shed, aren't they? Which they're quite entitled.
They were living in a shed, and they had a mobile home there, and council were fully aware of what was happening then. And I'm just going to mention 3 items that from another objector.
Just on that point, I just wanted to make it clear that everyone was aware where they are living.
Yeah, well, they moved there, did an alteration to a shed which they were living in, and they're also combining that shed with a mobile home.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Now, this is from another objector. Now, since purchasing 508 Rouse Street Tenderford, the owner and his partner have spent considerable time on site without any septic in place. I believe that the effluent has been buried on site at occasion and a putrid smell occurs. Well, I'll support that, but the council have taken action to stop that. Now, if a DA is issued, how can council guarantee to residents all building work will be carried out in accordance to their approval specifications, as the owner cannot be trusted given his blatant disregard to council planning laws surrounding residents with bringing these sheds on site even before a DA was lodged? Now, also, if a DA is approved, will this lead to a precedent of these dongas being used around this end of town, deflating the values and appearances of the area? In addition, if council does pass this DA, they'll be going against the 6 submissions lodged by local residents, which is a majority vote for the area. Now, I'll just get back to what my notes said that I gave to people here. It devalues the real estate in the existing area that complied with the covenants. Now, it doesn't matter what they do. This is still a combination of 3 sheds, 3 dongas, turned into a house on the cheap. And the thing that worries me about this, the other residents who are bought there under these covenants, what right do they have to come back and have a go at me? Everyone else has complied apart from this one. And when it comes to that sort of thing, and I thank every councillor in this room for making the time to go out there and look at the project. And now there's 6 houses out there involved in this house, and it's the dearest area in Tenterfield by a long way. These 6 houses would have values, well, in an average value in total of next door. And this is what we're talking about now. Now, this is our problem, nobody else's problem. The amount of money we spend and are going to spend on stages 1, 2 and 3 are considerable. This includes the intersection with Rouse Street and overcoming an existing problem with water covering the road in heavy rain. That is my problem. I'd have no objection to developers having to pay the cost of a new development. I think that's what council should always enforce, and which is always I believed in, because I sat in this room many years ago for a long time, and that's one thing I did emphasise particularly. But if a developer wanted to make money, the town shouldn't subsidise the development. Now, we want to develop a prestigious area that will enhance the image of our town. Now, on page 29, chapter 3 of our business papers, you've got chapter 3, residential development. Chapter 3 is a guide to applicants seeking to construct dwelling and multi-unit developments in the RU village zones across the LGA, and seeks to provide design outlines which will enhance the overall character and amenity of neighbourhoods. I don't believe this does that. And if you go onto the planning and site and the other items mentioned there's a lot of them that don't comply with that as well. Now, in this Well, I'm not having a go at anyone here, but we've used the example of a very expensive home there with the roof slopes and all that, which is in character with the proposal they've done. But I think it's very hard to compare a 600,000 house with 3 dongas, which would be made of a house on the cheap. Now that house there is designed by the chief architect from the Eco Village of Currumbin, and we've done that one, spent that sort of money so people know what they can do and what they can make out of funny looking houses. It's funny, that house my mother-in-law walked in one day and said, it's a terrible house from outside, but it's beautiful inside. I'll never forgot that comment. She's 92-year-old this year. Now,
Mr. Royston, I will acknowledge that you have a minute, but because I've stopped partway through and did ask for some clarity, with a bit of grey comment, in my opinion, that you did say, I will allow you a bit longer.
okay, thanks, that, because I was going to bring that up anyhow.
No.
Now, in the future here, what's the use of covenants on a block of land when it can't be enforced? I mentioned to a couple of councillors about something I knew about the Sailors' Estate. I'm not going to go on that now. I accept one of the councillors told me this morning that wasn't right, so I'm not going to go into it. I will discuss where I will find out where I got my information from and where they got their information from. But that's a personal issue with me, nothing with council. Now, the other thing, who want to spend the money I'm spending out there when you can't guarantee that someone's not going to build a donga beside you? You know, and one of these blocks of land, there's 3 blocks coming up for sale now, which come back in. One comes back in behind this development, which has already been spoken about earlier. But you know, that devalues that block of land. I just ran out of time, but I've got no idea about how much. I'm going to get a real estate agent to come out there and look at those blocks. Now, when I went back, when this block first came on the market, I went in, they wanted 150,000 for it, which is a bit above what I thought it was worth, so I wouldn't pay it. I'm a bit sorry now I didn't, but that shows you in Tenterfield now that house prices have risen, and I think in the latest survey, house prices in Tenterfield are the highest of any, have risen more than anywhere else in New England. I'd stand to be contradicted on that, but I'm pretty sure I've got my facts right. You know, a lot of this stuff is a personal issue to me, but I still long-term benefit the town. We've got Tenterfield Station over on that side of the house. We've spent a fortune renovating the manager's cottage for Tenterfield Homestead, and we're very proud of what we've done. And out there now, it's I've showed every council the block and the stages it's going to go into, but I just can't understand how council can recommend to approve what's happening out there. I'm disappointed in it, and I've got very good cooperation from Tamay, and I really commend her on this report.
Noted, Mr. Royston.
Okay, well, that's all I've got to say. I don't want to confuse everyone, but thanks for your time here.
No.
And what I've said about legal stuff is not what I want to do, and I don't even know whether I do it or not.
Mr. Royston, will offer councillors, and it needs to be, and I think this is in fairness, Mr. Royston, you're speaking against the application. Councillors, if it's to do with the report and you want some clarity about Mr. Rossington's objections, and I will be game enough to say that he leads the group who are against this out there, and I'm trying to be as fair as I can. If you do wish to ask a question to Mr. Rossington, we'll allow that. Councillor Bronwyn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. On having a look at the site and being a keen gardener, I was somewhat concerned with the proximity of some of the plantings to existing fence lines. Am I right in believing if those trees grow to what would be their normal size, that will create an incursion on fence lines which would upset future ability to replace those fences as needed?
On the block of land that adjoins me, those trees are pencil pines. I think they're probably 300 centimetres or 400 centimetres too close to my fence. At the back of the block where, excuse me, where council want a sort of a hedge built, the trees they've got there, they've got eucalyptus trees there now. They will not form a hedge to hide the other blocks. And do you mind if I just ask Glenn, on your side of the thing, the trees they've planted there, Are they too close to your land?
Yeah, they are. And they will take a long, this is from my perspective, they will take a long time because they didn't plan them correctly like we did planned our trees. So it took them years and years before they even.
Well, I'll take that the question's been answered. Is there another question to Mr. Rosson to do with his presentation? You have one more. You didn't indicate, councillor, but just no, I don't wrestle you. Trying to be fair to everyone, councillor. Councillors, is there another question from another councillor to do with Mr. Rosson's presentation? I'll take Councillor Very, and out of respect, councillor, we'll come back to you. Councillor Very, you have a question to do with the presentation?
Yes.
Yes? Microphone, please, councillor.
With the, the facade of the building, would you be happy with the facade of the building is altered considerably at the back and the sides?
I'd have to see what they've done, and I've asked for a copy of the floor plan of the building because of Privacy Rights Council can't supply me with that. I accept those facts because privacy laws these days can be a very pain in certain area of your body.
Thank you, councillor. Thank you, Mr. Rossington.
Just, can I have one more thing to say before I go? If you look at...
You're not going. You've got one more question to answer.
Yeah, but after that.
Well, can I leave your comments to do with your presentation?
Yeah.
No, I'll take a question, then you can finish then. Is that all right?
I'd like to, can I finish this or not?
Well, at the moment, I'm taking questions from councillors.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure as a previous councillor, Mr. Rossington, that you'll handle this. And I'll ask you to complete what you're going to say then, and then we're going to move this into deal with. Councillor Roman Petrie, you have one question.
Thank you. Due to the location of the proposed site being right at the back of the block on the highest elevation, with the growth of the trees, is that going to disguise that building, or it would still be visible from the road and the surrounding allotments?
I think it'll always be visible, the road from somewhere. The trees they planted at the back of the allotment now will not hide the building. But in the report to council, they're going to request that a different type of tree be planted there. That's what I assume from reading the report.
Thank you, councillor. Mr. Rossington, we'll allow you to make your last comment.
Only last comment, I want to draw the attention to the fact that here it talks about what council do, and second last paragraph on the page, there is nothing to prevent the original developer of the covenant or anyone else subject to the covenant taking their own civil action against a person who does not comply with the covenant. That's the one that concerns me a lot, because I read that this way,
yep,
that the existing landholders who have complied with that covenant do have an opening at me. And, you know, I don't study law. All I work on is common sense. And if I want no answer to a question like that, I'll use a barrister.
Yep. If I can answer to do with that what you've raised, Mr. Rossington, it is in our LEP, which council did spend a lot of time in bringing forward, and we're due to review it very soon. But I think it's been well documented. I note your comments, but I think it's clearly stated what the situation council's in.
Yeah.
Without you and I getting in a debate.
Nelly,
I do thank you for your presentation.
yeah.
And
thank you for the opportunity.
no, thank you. Thank you very much. Councillors, as we usually do, are you happy to move this item forward and we deal with it now? Could I have a motion, please, to move item ENV 6/19 forward, please? Moved by Councillor Very, thank you. Second by Councillor Peterson, I thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. And I will invite our town planner, Tomei Davison, to present this report. Thank you, Tomei, and welcome to our meeting.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, the report is being presented to council for a single dwelling. Normally these types of applications don't come to council, they're normally dealt with under delegated authority. The reason it's coming to council is that there was significant community concern when the buildings were placed on the site without development consent. As you can see in the report, that matter has been dealt with, and as mentioned by Mr Rossington. When the application was submitted, council did notify it because of the expressed community interest or the local interest in the proposal, and we did receive objections. So in accordance with council's policy, that's the reason it's come to council. The recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I apologise, councillors, to Nolene's credit and the great work she does. We need to have another motion to actually deal with the recommendation. We've moved it forward, Now I need another motion actually to deal with the recommendation. Councillor Sawyer, and I do apologise, councillors. Moved by Councillor Sawyer, and I thank you. Second by Councillor Berry, and I thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. I apologise, Tomei. Did that confuse everybody? Tomei has presented the report.
Yeah, you don't need to move it because they've got to debate it.
Okay. So we've moved it. We're dealing with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody happy with Tomei's presentation? I'll take questions to our town planner to deal with the report. Councillor Berry, thank you.
Tomorrow on page 30, we've got the front facade of the building, then we've got two sides and one rear. Can anything be done to alter those sides with so that can look a bit more presentable?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there are options for council to include conditions that can request the applicant to alter the architectural design. That might be through increasing window openings, some other sorts of architectural features. Normally what would happen is we would go back to the applicant and request them to do that prior to actually issuing a consent, but it is possible.
Thank you.
Other questions to our town planner to deal with the report? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Tomei, given that the DA lodgement for a previously used building has only been lodged subsequent to neighbourhood complaint, in discussions with the proponent, had they at any stage intended to come to council, or did they just expect that this is Rapides rules?
Through you, Mr Mayor, as I understand it, there were discussions with council prior to the buildings being moved. The explanation, and we do always ask for an explanation as to why development has occurred without consent. The explanation given was that there were some timelines or some timeframes that restricted them in terms of the relocation of the buildings. This is quite common with relocatable buildings, that they need to be removed from a site. It doesn't mean that that it's lawful that they do it, but that was the reason behind it.
Yep, I'll allow councillor.
Thank you. The other one I was wondering, is the bore, as stated in the report, is it properly licensed?
Through you, Mr Mayor, council isn't the regulator or authority to licence it. That's just on the word of the owner that they had the bore installed. I can only assume that it is.
Okay. So to clarify, therefore, it's confirmed the bore is installed, but its certification is an unknown. Thank you.
Other questions? I'll go to you, Councillor McNish, then to you, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mr Rosington's obviously set out to create a high-quality estate down there. Having driven over it the other day, I just realised what a beautiful area it is, and the potential there is incredible. And the fact that each block is 1 to 2 acres makes it, a large area for lifestyle. To make it make it sustainable like that, he put covenants on. Two of the ones that stuck out to me was, no building which has been previously erected on any other land cannot be moved onto the land. And secondly, no building shall be erected of materials other than new materials. Now, those 2 points, were they taken into consideration when you made your determination, Tomei?
Through you, Mr Mayor, as is contained in the report, council's LEP has a clause which prevents the enforcement of privately issued covenants. So legally, I don't take that into consideration. That's the same with this estate and with the covenants on Sadler's estate. So the LEP provisions override those covenants, and lawfully I can't put those covenants into place.
Well, maybe we need to look at those, because what's the point of putting covenants on and choosing who you want on your land or what you want on your land if council can just override it?
I'll go to, thank you, Councillor. I'll go to Councillor Forbes. Yep. Microphone, please, Councillor.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you have any sort of studies or evidence that, if this is approved, that it's going to significantly affect the, the values of, surrounding properties?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we don't have any evidence to that effect, no.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sawyer, and I'll go to you, Councillor Rogan, then.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you to Tomei. Given the recommendation is to approve, should we to do so, what recourse would council have if the person making the DA continues their pattern of non-compliance and doesn't complete the required approval within the required time, what recourse does council have if we did approve?
Through you, Mr Mayor, council's recourse comes under the provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. So non-compliance with development consents, non-compliance with development conditions. So there are options in terms of enforcement, again, penalty infringement notices, and council can also place orders on properties to actually carry out work. If those orders aren't completed or the applicant fails to do those works, council can carry out the work and seek costs to reimburse council for those works.
Thanks to me. Follow up to that, we're all well aware that there are unapproved developments at Drake in particular, that we've had 3 years and we still haven't won the battle to get rid of them. So it's open-ended, isn't it? We can take all the action legally under the law, under the Local Government Act, to say you can't have that, you've got to remove it. But the fact of getting them removed is actually toothless.
Noted, councillor. Tomei.
Through you, Mr Mayor, what I will say is with all previously used dwellings applications, the applicant is required to lodge a bond with council. So we hold in council a bond to the value, I think it's around about $7,000, which can be used in the event that either building works aren't completed or the buildings would need to be removed. It generally would be for removal of that building, would cover that cost.
Thank you, councillor. Thank you, Tomei. Councillor Rogan, question to the report?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's more my comments, if I'm able to
Yep.
do that.
I'm happy to accept, councillor.
Thank you. First thing I'd like to say is that we're here this morning to vote on the application that was submitted by the the person who's put in the DA. We're not here to really take into consideration what's happened before, i.e. the dongers moved on there and all that. That was a matter for council to deal with.
And they have dealt with it, councillor?
And according to this report, they've done that.
Yep.
So we're just here about, so it really comes down to the amenity of the area and the covenant that was put on it and whether it's suitable or not. And that's what we should be looking at. And I'm a little bit with Councillor Very in so much as they are dongers or whatever you want to call them. And no matter what you do, you'll always see that window profile that tells you that it's a donger. So I'd like to see, if it's approved, some really strict conditions about the placement of those windows or changes to them, the windowsill area, that sort of stuff, to change the actual look of those big slab-sided donger effect. And I think I'm going to request that if we're able, that we're only given this proposal a short time, a matter of days ago.
Yep.
So I don't believe, for me anyway, and hopefully it's the same as for other councillors, that there's been enough time to get my head around what we need to do here. And I'd like to see more conditions worked up and to have a look at those before I voted, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other questions to do with the report? I'll start up here, councillor. No, I'll go with you, councillor McNish, and I note that, and then I'll come to councillor Bronwyn-Petrie and councillor Very. Question to the report, councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. More a comment or a reply to Bob's comments there. A donger's a donger's a donger. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And whatever is done is still going to look second rate. Whether with big windows or little windows or big doors or little doors or whatever. And I think what we've got to do as a council is knock this on the head this morning, make a decision one way or the other, and let events take their place.
To councillor, before I ask the councillor Bronwyn-Petrie, councillors, be aware, every councillor's got their opinion, and councillor McNish has obviously just given his, so it's not to sway anyone. Don't feel pressured that you need, and out of respect, councillor, I need to note this. Councillor Bronwyn-Petrie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Question to the report, councillor.
Also a comment.
Yes.
And yes, we're not here to pressure people, and neither are we here to be pressured either.
No.
In our economic growth and tourism of our operational plan, we have DP 401, which is provide and facilitate future economic growth throughout the Shire, and DP 409, which is promote the livability of Tenterfield Shire as a place to live, work and play. Now, we are very fortunate that we have local people in this shire prepared to invest heavily in our community
Noted.
and meet our council requirements at great expense, often criticised about the expense, but very great expense for the necessary infrastructure, which in this development is actually above and beyond that in the future stages. Now, my feeling is that were we to approve the development today, it would send a most dreadful message to potential investors in trying to improve and grow our shire and set a dreadful precedent. As it's already been stated here, there are other housing subdivisions that have covenants as well. And we're all about attracting investment in the shire, not detracting from existing investment or from future investment. Now, as we can see from the report, there's another in stages, the following stages 1, 2, 3, 4, I think.
5.
There is the potential to have this same situation repeated in these following stages. So not only would that affect the land values of the existing homes, but it would also deter purchases of the blocks in the following stages, in my opinion. And also it would, if I was the person developing that and want to insist on a certain standard of development around me, you'd then question whether you'd even proceed. If you could end up with, for instance, container homes, let alone donga homes. So I find it, whilst we are dealing with what's before us today, in looking at, following from Councillor Sawyer's comments, you have to look at a pattern of behaviour. And there's been, so far, a complete disregard to the land title and covenant, complete disregard to the council requirement to lodge a DA prior to the placement of dongas, a complete disregard to the safe and health requirements of disposal of effluent, potentially a disregard to bore licensing as yet unknown. So therefore, that then leads one to believe that there's an inherent risk regarding compliance of any DA conditions that council were to impose if we to approve this due to that prior pattern of behaviour. I find that the covenant is very, very clear. And what would be the point of anyone going to a solicitor and to the Lands Department and placing a covenant on land if they have no basis in law? So obviously they do. Tenterfield Station, as was stated, is in very, very close proximity. Now, as we know, that is one of our most important historical items here with a huge potential. And we are looking at eventually actually getting on the State Heritage Register and getting extensive funding for that place. So it does concern me greatly that if we were to allow this to continue, we put a lot of things at risk. Existing investment, future investment, and future heritage value. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Very, you've indicated, and I'll go to you, Councillor Peters, and then I will wrap it up. No, Councillor, I'll go to Councillor Very, then to you, Councillor Peters.
Okay,
You happy with that, Councillor Very?
that'll do. With the conditions on the development itself, it says there about planting shrubs and all that behind the building. Unfortunately, even if the shrubs are planted, we don't know what they're going to be, how well they can grow. They can plant them upside down. They can do anything with them. So, you know, that's really a non-event to hide the back of the building. Personally, I'd like to see, like Bob was saying, if we're going to pass this, I'd like to see something done to the back of the building and the sides of the building. I don't just mean a couple of windows either. I mean something structurally changed there, as in like putting another room or whatever you want to call it on the side of that building to really structurally change the look of the sides of the building and the same at the back. So you'd have to come out there, say 10 feet or whatever. I know it's going to be a significant cost to the person, but at least it might make it more visually acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In my personal opinion, I don't think it's a building that really fits in with the town area. As pointed out before, it's in the Tenterfield Station area. And if we allow things to go ahead like that, you know, it's not a good look for the town. I think out in the bush it might be all right where no one can see it, but in the town it's a different matter. Thank you.
Councillor Murray, you haven't spoke. Did you wish to? I'll give you the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. I concur with what Councillor Rogan is saying here. I believe we need more time to create more fairness between both parties, quite frankly.
Noted, Councillor.
So I would ask for more time.
Yep. In the wrap-up, councillors, and I say this with the utmost respect, Councillor and Councillor Rogan, I'll give you some time. You've indicated about that you need to move something along those lines if you're wishing to do that, which I have no problems with at all and actually support. So, but I need to wrap up a bit. Councillors will need to be fully aware of our staff when they bring a report to the standard of this report that our town planner has. It has been noted by Mr. Ross in his objection that it is of high standard. And I commend you, Tomei, and the effort that you put into this. As a council, when we decide on things like this, and I respect and note everyone's comments here this morning, and I don't for one moment think I don't, because I do. But the main thing which I think we are missing, and Councillor McNish, I speak about your comments to do with the covenant, and it's something that, and I say this with respect, it is clearly noted, developer can put whatever covenant they want, but it's not enforceable by council. And that is an LEP, and that's another battle. If we wish to change that or make an amendment, we can when we go through if we think that that's not right. But for someone to, and I say this with respect to Mr. Royston, if someone to sell blocks of land and then say every house on it's got to be blue, well, I wish them the best because that's something that council cannot enforce, and it is clearly stated there. If we do vote against this, if we were to vote against this today, we would have to have a fair bit of objection to it because it's got to stand up in a court of law if it was challenged, because the officer's recommendation is to approve. That's about all I've got to say with the wrap up. Councillor Rogan, I'll give you the opportunity if you wish to move along the lines of dealing with this at a later date. And in fairness, before I do, we've only heard from one side of the party. I would love to see us meet with the developer, with the person doing the house, and actually have an on-site meeting with them. In fairness, and I think this councillor is very good at that. So that's one thing that I need to note. Councillor Rogan, do you wish to do something along those lines?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, actually I would.
Yep.
Now, I'm not sure whether this can be a recommendation to defer
Right.
the current officer's recommendation to allow time for council to further consider the development application itself with a view to establishing more stringent conditions and also to consider any legal implications.
Okay. Councillor, can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Gary Very, thank you. Why I've asked for that, because I will go to Tomei and Mr. CE to give us some advice there.
Can you just read that again for me, please, Paul?
That the recommendation to allow council more time to consider the DA to allow.
Okay.
Conditions and legal.
Considerations of more stringent conditions and also to consider any possible legal implications.
The stringent conditions, can we put in there something about altering the facade of the back of the building? Or
Comments from people that have.
Happy with that, Councillor Rogan?
Just read it as we go, councillor.
The recommendation to allow council more time to the DA. I'm just not sure about to allow, consider the DA allow consideration of more stringent conditions and any possible legal. Yeah, I think that's. Yeah.
Do you want to put in there, councillor, and that we have an on-site meeting with the developer?
And to allow time to arrange a meeting with the applicant.
Yep.
To gain a perspective.
I'll go to our staff and our CE. Councillor, you have a bit of a mellow over that. Make sure you're happy with it. Tomei, did you want to reply straight away for?
I'd like to make a
Yep.
response.
Okay. Thank you, Tomei.
Yes, through Mr. Mayor, that's certainly a valid option to defer consideration of the report to look further at design issues and certainly a site inspection. Normally, as I said earlier, what we would do is we would consult with the applicant and get them to come up with some altered plans rather than us condition it to do X, Y, Z, give them the option to put in some different architectural relief to the elevations of the building. And we'd go backwards and forwards until we were sort of reasonably happy with that, and then actually have a plan to consider rather than try to condition it.
Do you want some comment, Mr. C?
Through Mr. Mayor, I've got one question. Through Mr. Mayor, I've got one question to May in relation to the 40-day period and whether or not that would fall outside the next council meeting, which is actually on the 29th of this month.
Through Mr. Mayor, the 40-day period is referred to as the deemed refusal time period for assessment of development applications. So once 40 days has lapsed, any applicant can choose to appeal to the Land and Environment Court on the basis that council hasn't actually made a determination, and they can deem that it has been refused. We've already passed that 40-day period. So it's an option that's open to applicants, but it's rarely taken up because we're actually progressing and we're dealing with the application.
Yep. And councillors, just on that, I need to remind everyone, and I commend our senior planner and town planner and our CE, that we as a council, that we are always reminded of any legal implications that we will face and put this council at financial risk. It's something that we always need to take into account when we make decisions, and when we deal with DAs especially, that the applicant has every right to take council to court for whatever reason. So that's how good our staff are to remind us of that. It's not putting the pressure on us, but we need to take that into account. I just need to note that. By all means.
Sorry, just more so a matter of procedure. The recommendation that's been put forward for voting on at the moment talks about the consideration of more stringent conditions. It may be beneficial for council to review the existing conditions and make any amendments rather than foreshadowing anything that they might like to put in there.
Right. So, Kylie, you're referring to the wording of that? Yep.
Sorry. Says there to allow consideration of more stringent conditions. It seems from the mood of the floor that perhaps we're not sure what conditions we might like to amend.
Yep.
So that perhaps the wording could reflect that, which is allow consideration of proposed conditions as opposed to.
You have to accept that, and councillors, once again, staff do not make amendments, or do they vote? But they are here to give us advice. I do take your advice on board. And councillor, you don't have to take that advice on board. But as a mover,
happy with that, Mr.
you're quite entitled to.
Mr. Mayor, councillors don't have to state the conditions, do we? That'd be up to.
No, I don't think it'd be relevant for councils to state that. I don't think. Nor do we have just hang on, councillor. Nor do we have the skill either, I don't think. Okay, councillors. Councillor Rogan, are you happy with the wording up there that the recommendation be deferred to allow council more time to consider the DA to allow consideration of proposed conditions and any possible legal implications to allow time to arrange on-site meeting with the applicant?
Mr. Mayor, if we could put the word review, the condition review in there somewhere to allow a review.
Yeah.
I'll come in a minute, just bear with me. So you happy with that, councillor? Okay, councillor, in fairness, you're to do with the move. I'll come to you in a minute. Councillor Bronwyn, did you have to do with what we're talking about now, the recommendation? Did you want to speak to that or? Okay. Okay. Well, what I was going to do was ask for the mover to speak and to the seconder to speak, and then I was going to put the recommendation.
No, after they speak.
Well, I'm happy, but they'll have closing comment after that. So, councillor, you want to? Yes, thank you, councillor. So you wish to speak towards the recommendation, councillor?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just believe that considering how late in the process councillors were informed about the actual development application and therefore the time we've had to consider it, Mr. Rossington was kind enough to invite us all up there at different times to show us around. I do believe that, and I did say to Mr. Rossington the other day that the applicant has the same right.
Yep.
So that's one reason I'd like a deferral, and the other one is there's obviously, well, there's two more. One is the aesthetics, which we spoke about, and the other one is, so therefore we should consider the conditions to see if those aesthetics can't be changed, and I'd like to see us given the opportunity to have a look at what council has proposed to put on as conditions first. And then the legal implications, I do understand that, and I'm not by any means any sort of legal person, but I do understand that the covenant that was placed on by Mr. Rossington is not enforceable by council.
Sure.
But if there are any doubt about legal implications to do with that, I think it would behave council to look into that a little better, just to advise us on whether council's in the correct position or not. So for all those reasons, I think we need more time and we need to discuss it further. So
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Verity, the second, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I'll say something. I'm like Councillor Rogan. I believe in fairness. I think the other person should be given their 2 bobs worth. And also with that, when they discover how costly it's going to be, they might even decide to make a new house, because it's not going to be cheap to alter the facade of those buildings. They'd probably have to buy a new donga or get something put on there to bring it out to alter the shape. And with the cladding, it's not going to be a cheap exercise. And I think that's what their intentions may have been, to get a cheap dwelling. And I'm also in favour of development. If we knock the development, that development on the head, are we going to be seen as a pariah to all future development?
No.
But what I'm really concerned about is if Mr. Rossington knocks any future development on the head, because we might have a high-tech, high income series of buildings up there, which outweighs the latter. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillors speaking for the recommendation. Councillor Petrie, Bronwyn, do you wish to speak? You're against it?
Yep.
Just bear with me. I'll ask for a speaker for first. Yeah, well, I'm asking for one more. I'm entitled to do that, I think. No others? Councillor Petrie, Bronwyn.
Yeah, actually, that's not many, but anyway, you talked before about houses being blue, and good luck to Mr. Rossington. There's actually plenty of covenants across not only this state, but indeed Australia, that relate to roof materials, external materials, roof colours, everything. And I've got plenty of friends who live in them. So it's not an unusual circumstance. We certainly want to welcome the proponent to Tenterville, absolutely. But the expectation is that they comply with the covenant, or else, if they don't like the covenant, don't buy that land and build elsewhere where that covenant doesn't apply. With regard to fairness, and if we're seen to be fair, how fair is it? And think of all of you, put yourselves in the positions of the neighbours, in fairness, who have spent a large amount of money in building in that area to maintain the conditions of that covenant and to create a highly desirable area, to also then encourage future people willing to do the same thing. So fairness, I think, is missing here. Should we keep deferring this? Because all we're creating is ongoing uncertainty for both the proponent and the existing people who have put their money where their mouth is and supported this town, as in the neighbours and the subdivision developer. We're having ongoing potential devaluation, and most of concern to me will have ongoing neighbourhood tension. So if you actually go by legal, and if you go by a LEP, what would we be deciding if under RU5, you can actually put in place neighbourhood shops and liquid fuel depots? And you could turn around and say, well, they're permitted with consent under RU5, so irrespective of Rossington's covenant, because we can't enforce Rossington's covenant under our LEP, we would therefore have no grounds to stand on to knock back a neighbourhood shop on one of these blocks or a liquid fuel depot. I do not think so. I can tell you, I'm pretty sure what the vote would be. So let's be real about what is in the LEP, and let's be real about fairness, and let's be real about the type of investment we do want to encourage, and that we aren't a deterrent to the support of our local people who are actually willing to both develop areas and in line with all our conditions, and also the people who are willing to buy there and uphold that and create a really nice area.
Yep.
And as I said, there's plenty of other land. If you don't like those conditions and you don't want to comply with them, then don't buy there.
Is there any other speakers against the motion? Councillor Sawyer, yes?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I believe that the demonstrated behaviour by the applicant under the DA has already been given a fair amount of fairness in the process. They also had the opportunity to address the council this morning and have chosen not to.
Yep, noted.
So the fact that they didn't doesn't mean they weren't given the opportunity.
Yep.
I think Councillor McNish was right. A donga is a donga is a donga. We're looking at a development application to dress up a series of dongas,
Yep,
masquerading as a house, and it doesn't comply with the neighbourhood, in my opinion.
thank you, councillor. Councillors, I will put the recommendation. It's moved by councillor Rogan, seconded by councillor Very. All in favour of the motion? Because it's a DA, yes? Yep, councillor Very. All in favour of the recommendation that we got on there, moved by councillor Very, Rogan, seconded by councillor Very. Councillor Very, councillor Rogan, councillor Forbes, I'm sorry. Councillor Rogan, councillor Murray, councillor Petty. Against?
Sorry, can we just do that again?
Okay. This is for the,
'Cause I
yeah,
didn't have their hands up.
I'm sorry, put your hands up and I will go through it again. So for the recommendation, right, moved by councillor Rogan, second by councillor Very. It's on the board, councillors, for that, which is to hold this over. So we'll have councillor Very, councillor Forbes, councillor Rogan, councillor Murray, councillor Petty. Against? Councillor Peters, councillor Bromwich Petrie, councillor McNish, councillor Sawyer. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's 5 all. Oh, apologise. Thank Christ for that. Okay, the recommendation, the motion now becomes a recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? Correct in saying that?
So that one's been carried.
Yeah, so now,
that Overrides.
yeah.
That overrides.
So I
the
don't have to move that?
recommendation. I don't think
Okay.
so.
Apologise, I thought we had to go back and then that becomes a recommendation. Okay, councillors? That's it. Can I have a motion? Thank you, Tomei, for your presentation and all the work you put in. Thank you, Mr Rossman, for your presentation. Councillors, can I have a motion to go back to, yes? Yep. Yep. No- Well, there's options there. Am I right in saying that? Are having an extraordinary meeting next Wednesday. We could do it as soon as then if council wish to, but we need to have because it's in that recommendation that we arrange a site inspection with the applicant. Yeah,
So the only consideration is it probably needs to go to next month's meeting. I'm not sure that we'll be able to comply as an administration with
Within
the
the week,
requests from the motion passed by council to organise a site meeting and to also get some advice that council's requested from us.
okay, fair enough. So we hold over the next,
Yes.
yeah, okay. All good?
It will take a little bit of time, I'm sorry. Otherwise we could have done that.
I don't need a motion to go back there. Okay, councillors, we'll continue on with our meeting. We move on, but go back to page 18, for item COM 5/19, classification of Crown Land Reserves as operational. Can I have a move and a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Murray, I thank you, seconded by councillor Sawyer, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to you, Kyle.
Heidi will deliver this one.
Apologise.
Management property.
Yep. I'll hand over to Heidi Ford, Manager of Property and Buildings. Welcome, Heidi, to our meeting to present this report.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. The paper today addresses the classification of the Crown land. We've been delegated the 22 parcels and we're seeking approval to propose 5 lots be classified as operational land with the Minister.
Just if I may, Heidi, and I don't mean to be problematic, on pages, on on page 23 of the hard copy. I apologise. And it's just more of a clarity thing for me, and I apologise I haven't been able to catch up with you before the meeting. To do with the, to be classified as operational, I fully understand that, but you've got Jennings, which is the old dump site, which I'm fully aware of because it's very close to us. Dalman dump is one too that would be not used anymore in the Woodinbong area. What do we use it then if it becomes to be classified as operational?
So for it to become classified as operational, it needs to contain emergency services, have sanitary purposes or urban services.
Yeah.
So these particular parcels have been identified by Crown Lands for us to address.
Yep.
So it's not all of the Crown Land within our shire, it's only these 22 parcels that we're initially dealing with.
Yeah.
And that Jennings site is one of them.
Yeah, and it's no longer, although it's capped, it's no longer a dump.
No.
No, and the Dalman, well, I thought Dalman might be there, but, because it's not either, but it's fenced, it's a fenced off area from the Woodinbong area. Anyway, just a question. Any questions to Heidi to do with the report? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Heidi, what are urban services? And also with regard to emergency services, the different parcels of land in relation to Drake, is the Drake fire shed in one of those?
Thought I'd seen it there.
I'm not sure if the Drake fire shed is. I don't believe so, or it would have been identified and we would have discussed it. But I can't 100% say no for sure. I'd have to double check. Well, urban services would be anything that's required for our infrastructure and operation as a council in the area.
So therefore, the Drake Community Hall is not classed as an urban service, but where it says if they are classified as community, will require a plan of management to be prepared pursuant to the Local Government Act, including consideration to the Native Title Act. Well, some of these particular blocks were, we had correspondence year before last, clearly showing that native title had been extinguished. So does that mean that it's including consideration to Native Title Act where there is no extinguishment, or is that including Native Title Act even including where it has clearly been extinguished?
So we have to assume that native title exists unless it has been shown to be extinguished. So we would need to confirm that for those parcels. That's all. Not through doing the research again, but through checking that the extinguish certificate or statement or record is there.
I'm just a bit concerned because we had quite a lot of heartache at the time of the Western Bundjalung native title claim, where on Schedule 2, some of these lands were identified as being granted native title. However, Schedule 4, in paragraphs, whatever clause 4 was, etc., had clearly said unless you proved extinguishment, which we did through the erection of buildings, etc., prior to December 96.
Something like that, yep.
So we just need to be really clear about where we're going here. And I'm a bit reluctant to vote on anything till we double check that Drake RFS shed.
Yep. Kylie's got some comment there, Councillor.
I'll make some comment. I don't know if it's enlightening or not. The Minister has come back with the 22 lots, which isn't the sum total of all of our Crown land, obviously. One of the largest tests for whether or not something can be classified as operational community is the level of public access to be granted. So not foreshadowing all of the other issues that come with those parcels of land, we're actually making the request to the Minister, which we need to do prior to going forward and doing the plans of management, as well as in those reports to the Minister, we actually have to demonstrate, as Councillor Bronwyn Petrie has said, whether or not native title has been extinguished or whether there are any other Crown issues associated with that land. So what we're actually voting on today is to is for council to accept the fact that all of those lots contained in 2, that we're happy to remain community land and to provide a level of community access. And the first part of the recommendation, that we apply or request that the minister actually go forth and categorise those other as operational land, whereby we can restrict public access, and we also don't actually have to have plans of management.
But I'm not happy to have it as community if it's an RFS shed, because that fits into emergency.
So with those specifically, we're only talking about these lots. So you've identified a lot on there that you think is the RFS shed.
I'm just trying to get.
No, that's
back
okay.
from-
That's what I'm.
If you just
Sorry,
give me a
maybe I've
mo-
missed the question.
That's exactly right. Because if we included his community and then suddenly we go, oh, we've made a mistake, we've got to now change it back to emergency, we look like dills. So I just said we need to check it before we vote on it.
Yeah, but councillor, just for clarity for myself, what you're referring to is with classified community, I'm referring to our business paper, that the Drake RFS shed is not there.
There's the Drake Recreational Ground.
Yes, I've got that.
There's Woodward Park and there's the Drake Reserve Trust. Now, are any of those lots the ones that are contained within where that RFS shed is built? I'm just trying to find.
The only ones I see there are the Reserve Trust, you would think would be the town common. I would have thought whether that the fire shed was in there, I don't know, councillor.
That's what we need to double
Yeah,
check
huh?
before we vote.
Noted. If I can ask Heidi, how hard is that to, I'm making another job for you, mate. How hard is that to find out?
That's not too difficult. We should be able to find that out for you.
Right. Do you want to hold this over until, and can you find that out? I mean, is it of importance that we need to do that, councillor Petrie? Is that what you're wishing?
I'm just pulling them up now because at the time that Western Bundjalung actually did take a photograph. Yeah, we had that massive
Yep.
amount of maps.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to find the portions here now. So,
Yep. Well, what I'll offer, councillor, Heidi, if you could, that we might break for Smogo and give our staff a chance to maybe get some clarity on that. Is that all right? Okay. Yeah, no problems.
Bronwyn might find it while I'm talking.
Yep.
With the River Tree Recreation Trust and the Sandy Hills, or Sandy, what is it? Sandy, better check that one again. I always get those two mixed up. Sandy Hills Recreation Trust. I know where the River Tree one is, and I'd just like to suggest with those things there to let people know, because they access that area all the time, but not too many people know it's actually a reserve, a recreation reserve. I think we should have a sign there.
Yeah.
More than happy to take that on notice, and probably something that can be considered in the plans of management are things like advertising for the
Yeah.
reserves that we have,
Yep.
if council wishes.
And Jack would love to see that, councillor. So he would. Okay, councillors, we happy with that, because I need a motion that we suspend standing orders. We'll go and have a morning tea break. It'll give our staff some time to maybe come back with a bit more clarity on that. Heidi, thank you for being so obliging in that. And I commend you, councillor Petrie. I do note that and all the work we went in with that native title claim. So we do need a bit of clarity there. So if I can have a motion going that way. Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second by Councillor Very, that we suspend standing orders for morning tea. All in favour? Good, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't bring it. I should have. The list that we gave at the workshop is